but it'd be nice to have a break.
I just saw a report that as everybody was guessing, people are working harder when they can't travel.
It seems to be the case, yes.
There's no separation of work and home anymore. It's all just work.
Pak Andi, please help me to unmute Ibu Herlin, Ibu Emma, Pak Haryanto, Pak Florian Kit, FK4, because they are all the speaker and this panelists for our meeting today.
Yes, I'm here.
Ya, Ibu Emma, Pak Haryanto.
Florian, could I ask you a favor? Would you mind renaming yourself to ADB Florian Kit or just something? Because I didn't know who FK4 was. If you don't mind, that would just help us out a little bit, and then people can see who you are as you're speaking. And if we could do a quick test that your video is working, you can take yourself off if you prefer, if you're not speaking, but just to make sure that that's good to go.
So I think if all the speaker here, so I need to check whether Pak Dida will be representing Pak Monty already joining with us now. So I need to check. I will remind. Yes, wait. Yeah, I need to remind him first. Halo, ya Pak Rana. Ya Pak Rana. Oh.
Halo. Hello, Cecilia.
Hello. How are you? Thanks for joining.
Fine. Yeah, fine. Hello, Emily. Hello, Bu Herlin.
Hello, Pak Kevin.
Hello, Pak Haryanto. Hello, everybody.
Hello. Thanks
Hello,
for joining
Pak
us
Peter.
today.
Yeah. So this is still good morning for Europe time, yeah?
Yes, it's just before 9, coming up to 9 here in Paris.
So Cecilia, can you hear my voice clearly?
Yes, very well. Thank you. Nice to meet you, Björn.
Hello, Emily. How are you?
Hi, Pak Haryanto. How are you?
Fine. And you?
Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes, yes.
I'm good. Good.
Yeah. You in Paris, or?
Yes, in Paris at the moment.
Okay. Yeah. Bu Emma, selamat datang, Bu Emma.
Selamat siang, Pak Haryanto. Good afternoon.
Selamat siang, Bu. Selamat bergabung, Bu Emma ya. Terima kasih.
Terima kasih, Pak Haryanto. Saya hadir mewakili Pak Dirjen, Pak. Pak
Iya.
Dirjen,
Alhamdulillah.
Pak Wamen mengurusi kebakaran hutan, Pak.
Ke Rio ya, Bu?
Rio, Pak, iya. Supaya tidak melebar. Pencegahan.
Selamat siang, Ibu Emma.
Assalamualaikum semuanya. Assalamualaikum Pak Haryanto, Bu Emma.
Pak Rana, apa kabar? Ya Allah, udah lama banget.
Udah berapa tahun nggak ketemu ya, Bu Emma?
Apa kabar, Pak?
Aduh, ampun.
It's like a reunion ya.
Iya.
Iya. Ampun.
Bu Emma dibikin lagi acara yang undang Pak Rana, Bu.
Pak Rana, iya betul, Pak.
Tempo hari sibuknya refrigerant melulu ya. Masih inget teh. RMS, Refrigerant Management System. Aduh, ampun.
Iya.
Nah, udah kangen sama Bu Emma, Bu Bitul, Pak Mulekan.
Ya, kita adakan acara sama Pak Haryanto sekalian. Iya.
Alhamdulillah, iya betul. Ya tentang refrigerant lah, bagus itu tentang refrigerant sama energi efisiensinya.
Iya.
Halo Florian.
Hello, how are
Hi
you?
everyone.
How are you?
Very good.
Hi everyone, Pak Haryanto, Emily, Bu Emma, Bu Herlin, Florian, and others.
Oh, selamat siang Bu Farida.
Bu Farida, kangen juga ini. Assalamualaikum.
Ibu.
Salam.
Hello, Ibu Frida. Nice to see you.
Hi Emily.
Cari Bu
Nice
Farida.
to see you too.
Oh iya, Bu Farida apa kabar?
Bu Emma, long time not see.
Hello Emily, how are you? I'm Rana, if you do remember.
Yes, hi, Rana. How are you?
I'm fine.
Nice
how are
to
you
see
too?
you.
Where are you right now? Is it in Paris or what?
In Paris. In Paris
Wow.
at the moment. So, yeah, just working
Eiffel
here.
Tower
We're
is
working from
already-
home.
Eiffel Tower is already open, right now? Is it open for publics?
I don't know. Is it Kevin or Cecilia? I don't know.
About a month ago. It's quite a while ago.
Okay.
You have to take the stairs. You can't take the lift.
Exactly.
Are you at home, Pak Rana?
Yes.
Yeah, at home.
Sorry to interrupt you, ladies and gentlemen. Now we are still waiting for a colleague from Menko office, Pak Dida, and also Pak Agus. On behalf of Pak Monty, will be joining us soon. So maybe while we are waiting them to join with into the meeting room, maybe we can test the presentation. If Ibu Nur already get all of the files, Pak Andi or Pak Irwan, so maybe we can pass over the material to Ibu Nur just to test whether she can help on operating the presentation. Maybe from Pak Haryanto's presentation first, Pak Andi or Pak Irwan.
Mbak Nur has already get the both files. Maybe Pak Haryanto will take the share screen. Maybe Pak Andi can help for the share screen from Pak Haryanto presentations.
Yes, Mas, please, Mas. Make me as a co-host, please.
Yeah.
Already done, Pak Haryanto?
Yeah, I tried. Can you see this?
Yes, it's so clear. Yeah, I can see it.
Yeah. It's a nice picture for biogas plant. Is somebody else want to try with the slide? Or
Yes, please. Maybe Jim or maybe Bu Helen or maybe Kevin want to also share their screen. I mean, the operator will be a kind of, help you if you find technical difficulties to run on your screen, the presentation.
Pak Angga, sorry, I already passed my presentation to you, so who will share the my presentation today? I think the host, yeah? Not.
Ya, Ibu dibuka Bu izinnya untuk bisa share screen juga. Jadi kita sudah menyiapkan staff yang untuk bantu untuk jadi asrot untuk sliding the presentation.
So yeah, I think it's better you share my presentation from your side, not my side. It's okay. Yeah, but I can.
Sorry to interrupt, but I think it's easier if possible to centralize the presentation so we don't have to keep going back and forth, because depending on people's bandwidth, it could create some technical issues for the discussion. Does that work on the ministry side to just centralize whoever prefers that way?
Yeah, I will. Yeah, I mean, how about you, Pak Haryanto, Pak Bu Herlin, Peter, James, and also Kevin, if the operator will be centralized in one of the Director of Energy Conservation staff. Is that okay for you?
Perfect from the SDCL side.
Okay, so you just say the next slide, please. So it's
please, that's great.
You. Yeah.
Fantastic, thank you.
Okay, maybe Pak Irwan and Pak Andi can make Bu Nur to start to operate.
Bu Nur, please try to share screen to show the presentation for the example for the IEA and the ASHRAE, please.
Thank you, Pak.
Okay.
So can everyone see the presentations? It's a PDF.
Can, sir, can.
Yeah.
Yes.
So Manu, please try the from ASHRAE. I guess it's been slower here. Gonna check the technical.
Just to update you, I just got the information from Menko office that unfortunately Pak Dida cannot deliver the opening speech as he's still now leading the meeting. So he asked Pak Dida to just give the closing speech if it's okay for us today. Maybe on that situation, Pak Haryanto mohon izin mungkin bisa mewakili Pak Dida untuk menyampaikan sepatah dua patah kata, karena Pak Dida barusan tadi WA saya katanya masih mimpin rapat, mohon maaf, dan meminta hanya untuk ikut menutup acara saja, Pak. Begitu, Pak.
Baik, Pak.
Ya. So, can you hear me, Cecilia? Pak Dida just WhatsApp me that he cannot join to open the opening session, to deliver the opening speech. So he asked to just give the kind of closing speech because he's still now leading a meeting that still on process in the Menko office.
Okay, no problem. I have noted that and will adjust accordingly.
Okay, and also for all the participants, also the speaker, we will already have 3 documents for you to fill. You can find it in the chat room. First is regarding the absency. This is a kind of that you can find it there in the chatting room. The second one will be the presentation material. So our colleague already put the link for you to download. And the third one, there will be a questionnaire So maybe you can answer the questionnaire during the session today. So yeah. So we already have now 48 participants, maybe including with the speaker. So maybe we need to wait for a couple minutes before we starting the FGD today.
Okay. Let us know when you would like to begin.
Yeah.
Bapak Haryanto, Bapak Irwan, shall we go ahead and start? Or would you like to wait a few more minutes?
Haryanto, kita mulai saja atau kita masih nunggu 1-2 menit lagi? Baru ada sekitar 60 participants in our Zoom meeting room now. And I'm now check in the YouTube channel. Yo, running. Monggo Pak, saya ikut arahan Bapak.
Yeah.
I think we can start it.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Let's begin. Well, I'd like to welcome all the participants to this focused group discussion on financing models for efficient and low carbon cooling systems. And I'd like to first off start by thanking all of our speakers, discussants, and participants for joining this meeting today. My name is Cecilia Tam. I'm the team leader of the Clean Energy Finance and Investment Mobilization Program at the OECD. And on behalf of the OECD, we are very pleased to be co-hosting this discussion with Menko Economic Affairs and the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources. The OECD SEFIM program, which started last year, works closely with emerging economies to help improve the clean energy finance and investment policy frameworks to really help accelerate and facilitate the clean energy transition and to encourage more private sector finance in the clean energy space. We have a distinguished group of speakers and discussants joining us today for this very important topic, and I'm very happy to be able to moderate today's discussion. Our agenda today brings together government policymakers, experts from industry, the IEA, and the finance sector to discuss the crucial topic of cooling. Our goal is really to discuss how we can address some of the finance and investment challenges faced by the industry. According to the Economics Intelligence Unit, in the Cooling Imperative Report, Indonesia could experience more than 123 days a year with temperatures above 35 degrees. There is an urgent need for the country to develop an efficient cooling strategy and implement policies to ensure that the rapid growth in cooling demand is met with efficient and low carbon technologies. Our discussion today will focus on the potential for efficient cooling technologies to help support Indonesia's post-COVID economic recovery and highlight how new innovative financing models can be used to help bring efficient and low carbon cooling systems to market. On our agenda for today, we will hear from 5 distinguished experts, and I would like to request that colleagues keep to their allocated speaking times to ensure that we have sufficient time for discussion. Following the presentations, we will have a question and answer session where participants can submit their questions via the Zoom chat function. When you submit your questions, please let us know who your question is directed to. And to end our discussion, we have invited 3 distinguished experts representing government, finance, and industry to provide their views on today's discussion topic. To start our discussion today, I would like to invite Bapak Haryanto, Director of Energy Conservation, to provide opening remarks, as well as our first presentation, which will look at regulations to support investments in efficient cooling systems. Bapak Haryanto was previously Division Head at the Center of Energy Conservation Technology, BPPT. Bapak Haryanto, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Cecilia. Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Respect to Emma from Ministry of Information. Also respectable Pak Dita, or who represents from Ministry of Economic Coordinator. Respectable representative from SDCL, ADB, IEA, ASRE Chapter Indonesia, MASKE, ADB, many associations for energy efficiency in Indonesia. Ladies and gentlemen, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. On behalf of Ministry of Economic Coordinator, I would like to welcome to focus group discussion with the topic of a financing model for efficient and low carbon cooling system. It is, I think, very good opportunity for us in terms of how to starting model in financing in energy efficiency and also to reduce emission. As Cecilia mentioned that today FGD we will discussing about what the model actually and the appropriate to finance efficient cooling in Indonesia, because as a tropical country, Indonesia is very huge opportunity to implement efficient cooling, especially for commercial building application and also in industry. Today we have many speakers from SDCL, also from IEA, ASRE, and also from practitioner, it is Pak Rana, that will discussing about what could be that energy efficiency and financing model in energy efficiency and cooling system can be running in Indonesia. We hope that this today FGD will success, and we could also follow it up with the real project in energy in financing in energy efficiency in Indonesia. Thank you for your attention. We will start with the next agenda. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. So Cecilia, can we
Yes, please, Haryanto. If you want to start with your presentation.
Yes.
Thank you for the opening remarks.
Thank you. I will continue with my talk in regulation to support efficient cooling system investment. It is on point from point of view regulation in energy conservation relating to the cooling system in Indonesia. Yes, if we are talking about the regulation in energy efficiency in general, that we have government regulation number 70 and its derivative, national energy saving target is about 17% in 2025. This is equal to 368 million barrel oil equivalent, and then we should achieve these targets by contribution of all of sector in Indonesia. And it is the specific regulation in terms of energy efficiency, and also, of course, including cooling system, that in government regulation in number 70/29 on energy conservation. This is also talking about the how to make a standard in equipment, and also how to implement energy management in all of sector energy consumption. And second is a presidential decree number 22 year 2017. It is in Bahasa Rencana Umum Energi Nasional or National Energy Planning, that it is mandate that we should achieve 70% in 2025, and then it is the standard that we also already prepared. This is national standard in air conditioning system, and also national standard on lighting system, and national standard on building and flow. I think all of this standard still correlated with the cooling system, because this thing still influence in the load of the cooling system. So next, I will starting with the potential electricity saving in terms of cooling system. This is starting from LBNA, Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory. They studied that if we modeling until 2025, Then the potential of electricity saving is about 7 gigawatt in 2025. You can see here in the blue color that it is because of the utilization or consumption or electricity in cooling system. Then if we modeling until 2025, then the potential of energy saving is quite huge in Indonesia, because as Cecilia mentioned, that we are a tropical country, and that our cooling system or air conditioning system running every day. So the consumption of energy is quite huge. And from the opportunity that the cooling system is normally come from industry and commercial application, that in commercial, the potential of energy saving is around 10 until 30%. When we made a study in survey or audit energy in commercial building, that potential is around 10 until 30%. And if we break down what the saving potential in commercial building, sorry, this is in Bahasa, that in point 6, 7, and 8, this is through the implementation of a green building in commercial building or government building. And then also the implementation of energy conservation in government building. And next is through implementation of energy management in commercial building. Then we will obtain potential saving in energy conservation. And then we just want to show you that this is the significant energy use when we make a study in commercial building and government building. As I mentioned previously that because we are in tropical country, then the energy consumption mostly in building is using to power the to consume system. We can see here that the percentage is around more than 60%. Energy is consumed by cooling system, and even in commercial building, it is the energy consumption for running the cooling system is around 60%. And this study is conducted in most of big cities in Indonesia, and the potential is quite huge in cooling system application. And then next, I just thinking about how to running the model of financing project in energy efficiency.
I thought there was some technical problem on the internet. Maybe we can try it again.
Thank you, Pak Irwan. If participants could just bear with us for a minute or two as we resolve this technical issue. Bapak Iron, can I ask, should we perhaps have Kevin start his presentation while Bapak Haryanto reconnects?
Pak Haryanto now is reconnect, Cecilia. I can see.
Okay, thank you. I'm having trouble strolling through everyone.
Yeah. Pak Haryanto, can you hear us, Pak Haryanto?
Yes, I'm sorry. Apologize for. Thank you. Yeah, sorry. Apologize for the trouble in connection internet because today reported that's a problem with internet connection. Can we continue?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, okay. Yes. Yes, this is we start from here that the financing model in energy efficiency project, something like this, that we try to make a block diagram that we need the financings and then also the project warranty. This is that we are discussing for today, especially for cooling system. And for this, we is already preparing in certification of monitor, measurement and verification that I think it is will be need in project energy efficiency project for cooling system or others. And then we also already have a system in energy auditors that we have the certification of energy Indonesia. Then I think to run the energy efficiency financing project in Indonesia. There's some result in investment grade energy audit that we already conducted in several commercial building. That one is it is normally, if we are talking about the opportunity in energy efficiency project in building, is related to the cooling system. And all of these objects that we already conducted investment grade energy audit, all of the ECM, energy conservation measure, also involve the retrofitting or replacement of cooling system. And this is the second result in commercial building. This is just the examples, and we have several results in energy investment grade energy audit in commercial building. And this is in commercial building in shopping center. And this is also recommendation is about how to replacement of cooling system. And yes, the investment is almost around 20 or 10 million billion rupiah. And I will finish my talks for today with come up with summary. That one is right now we are preparing regulation related to regulation of ESCO in business model in Indonesia, and we hope that the regulation will very useful in terms of support to create ESCO in the field of energy efficiency. And then second is one of the obstacles in implementing energy efficiency project in Indonesia is the unavailability of funding for energy efficiency. And third is cooling system is an area that is focused on energy efficiency in the building sector because it is a significant energy use. And Next is to support the energy efficiency project. The National Measurement and Verification in Energy Efficiency Protocol has been prepared. I think this will be used in the next. And the last is we support and welcome to implementation of energy efficiency funding model, especially in cooling system. I think this is all of my talk. Thank you for the opportunity. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you very much, Bapak Haryanto, for your presentations and for highlighting the priorities and activities of the ministry in supporting energy efficiency and for efficient cooling investments. It's very good to hear that you'll be supporting funding models for efficient cooling investments. Our next speaker is Kevin Lane, energy analyst at the International Energy Agency, who will present on the IEA's work on the future of cooling demand. Kevin has more than 25 years experience working on energy efficiency, especially focused on the appliance and lighting sector. He has supported the development of standards and labels in various countries, including the EU, China, US, Australia, and Vietnam. Kevin, please go ahead. And if the ministry could help us put Kevin's slides on. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that kind introduction. And I take this opportunity to say good morning to everyone from Paris and to say that I'm delighted to be here, and thank you for the invitation from the ministry and from the ministries and the OECD to take part in this topic. So a very important topic. What I'd like to go through very briefly this morning is just to tell you a little bit about the work we've done in Indonesia and ASEAN, looking at the future of cooling, especially on space cooling is what I'll focus on in this presentation. And I'd also take the opportunity to introduce my colleague Emily McQualter, who's also on the phone call as well, who is involved in some of this research. Next slide.
Morning, everyone.
So what we see here is a map, just a way of, to represent how hot the world is in terms of heating and the requirement for heating. It's just the cooling degree days across various countries in the world. And what you see is across the central belt across the world, these red spots are essentially places where actually you not only would you like cooling, it's almost a necessity to have cooling in these parts of the world. So if you look at ASEAN, that's clearly a red spot, and Indonesia's in there as well. So in there we expect to be a great demand or requirement for heating. And if we go to the next slide, what we can see on here is on the dots and the line are the cooling degree days for the different countries. And we can see that, say, from Cambodia is about 4,000 cooling degree days, all the way across to Indonesia, 3,500, 3,000 to Vietnam. So in Southeast Asia, it's a very hot place and there is a requirement for cooling. And if you look at China and Japan, Korea, their cooling degrees are a lot lower, and yet the ownership in those countries is already a lot higher. So in ASEAN, it's less than 20% ownership of cooling at the moment. We'd expect that to grow rapidly, partly due to the increased heat in those countries, but also if we go to the next slide, we can see that the heating's likely to increase into by 2040, 2050, such as somebody's already said that Indonesia could see over 100 days with 35 plus degrees temperatures into the future. However, what's going to really drive ownership of air conditioners in the future is going to be the increase in GDP or wealth in the country. So people will be able to afford these cooling equipment. So if you look on the very right, we expect a very dramatic increase in the ownership of air conditioning products within the ASEAN and Indonesia as well. So if we go to the next slide. So this is our expectation of the stock of air conditioners across the ASEAN region, and Indonesia has probably taken about half of those. Got both residential and commercial equipment in there, although the energy by the commercial equipment will be relatively larger, of course. So this increase in ownership is really going to drive consumption. So here we're seeing going from 25 million units to over 300 million units within a very short period of time. So next slide. So if we want to improve or reduce energy consumption or improve conditions, what we want to do is to try and improve the efficiency of equipment. So if you look at the moment, we expect the efficiency of equipment to rise steadily over the next few years from maybe a seasonal energy efficiency rating around about 4. That might creep up to say 5 by 2040. However, if we want to be on a sustainable path, if we want to meet our Paris goals, we want to meet our sustainable development goals, so these are shown in our sustainable development scenario, we basically need to double the efficiency of air conditioning equipment within, say, the next 10 years if we want to do that. Increasing the efficiency will also have multiple other benefits as well. It will mean lower bills for consumers, will have a lower impact on the grid, it will lower emissions, so it's actually a good thing to improve efficiency. And if we look at the market already, there's already equipment that are in line or are much more efficient already. So this is an achievable goal. So go to the next slide. So on the top line here, what we expect to happen in terms of electricity consumption of AC units in Indonesia if there's no improvements in policy. So we'll go from, I don't know, 25 terawatt hours, and that'll be almost 5 times more electricity required just for cooling homes over the next 20 years. However, if we can improve the efficiency of the equipment that we install over the next few years, we can dramatically reduce that consumption. And we should also note that we can also improve the building's efficiency just by making them more insulated, maybe white roofs. And similar will also reduce the electricity demand that will be required in the future. We go to the next slide. So we can reduce the electricity demand, but I think what's more important, if you look on the left-hand side, this is showing what is the share of air conditioning as part of the total peak demand in any part of the day. I think the previous presentation showed that we expect there could be a very dramatic increase in the requirement, say peak time 7, 8 o'clock at night, where cooling where it currently only takes 10% of the electricity generation. In the peak, it could take up to 30% by 2040. So this will be quite problematic for the grid because it will mean a substantial increase in investment in the supply side if you want to meet that demand for this new equipment. However, if we can improve the efficiency in this SDS scenario, we could limit that growth. So it could be maybe half as much. So this will be a very positive impact for the grid by improving the efficiency of these equipment. On the right-hand side, if you look at the carbon dioxide emissions, efficiency has a very big role to play in terms of reducing emissions, as does improving the building. The rest will have to come from decarbonising the grid if we want to reach our sustainable development goals and our Paris agreements and have a sustainable future. Next slide. This is just a slide taken from the report. I think it was mainly trying to show that actually if you look at the markets today, so we've done an assessment of some of the markets, we can see that on the top block that there are already products on the market today that don't cost any more, that will take you from CO an efficiency level of 3 up to 4, 5 that don't really cost more across the region. Even going up to 6, the products already do exist on the market. They might cost a little bit more, but they will repay for themselves as well. And within 2, 3, 4, 5 years' time, these costs will be lower. And then I suppose we put another bit in here, which is to show an assessment of which country is actually manufacturing some of these products at the moment. So it's a more detailed assessment. So I'll skip that for the moment. Next slide. I was showing you this slide to say that one of the main programs or one of the main policies that governments can use is maps to try and improve the efficiency of products that are being installed. So it's a very effective program, and Indonesia has started on that path. And the expectation is that over the next few years, these maps are likely to be ratcheted up over time. So that's up to the ministry to decide what these levels will be, but this is an indicative pathway where these standards could go. And ASEAN as a region may well be going down that route as well. So I just wanted to show you this as one of the contexts that we expect standards to rise, and this is a key policy that's likely to happen. So I shall go to the next slide. So to leave time for discussion, I'll just leave some final thoughts. So in terms of air conditioners, the ownership is going to rise dramatically over the next year, mainly driven by increasing wealth in the country, but also the demand for that cooling, in fact, the requirement for cooling across the country. In terms of improving efficiency, the products do exist. They don't need to cost more. So improving efficiency is a very simple or it's a win-win situation. We can have more efficient products, save energy, have more electricity for other users. The two main policies are likely to be minimum energy performance standards and energy labeling. However, saying that, I think there's a lot of investments going to be needed if we want to install all these equipment over the next 20 years, and especially if we want them to be high efficiency equipment and also low refrigerant gases within those, so climate-friendly air conditioning equipment. So there's definitely a very important role for financing these and new financing packages. And we've already seen that some regulations around ESCO starting, but there are other roles, and we've got some very good speakers on the line today that will provide some information on these. And I would finish on one last bit related to the COVID pandemic. A lot of governments are spending money on trying to support their economies, and energy efficiencies and a very good way of supporting the recovery. They're very high in terms of employment generated for each dollar invested. So for appliances, a report from the IEA a couple of weeks ago was showing maybe it's about, say, 10 jobs per $1 million invested, whereas building retrofits might be even as high as 15 or in some countries much higher than that. So it's a very effective way of improving employment in regions. I would also say if there are some of these packages available, they can also be used to help kickstart some financing models as well, whether it's funding to back up some of these finance models. So at this point, I'll leave it there and hand over back to our chair.
Thank you very much, Kevin, for outlining the crucial role that deployment of efficient and low carbon cooling systems will need to play if we're going to meet our global clean energy and climate change targets, and also for highlighting some of the policy solutions that can help meet this challenge. I'd like to just ask participants to complete the registration form that has been shared by Pak Aang via the chat, and to also remind participants to submit questions via the chat function for our Q&A session, which will follow our speakers. Now we'll turn to Ibu Erlin Elianka, Chairwoman at ASHRAE Indonesia, to give us the market perspective on best available technology and highlight some of the financing challenges in a post-COVID-19 environment. Ibu Erlin is also an advisor to CLASP, the leading international voice and resource for appliance, energy efficiency policies, and market acceleration initiatives. Ibu Erlin, the floor is yours. And if we could ask the Ministry to load up your slides, please.
Thank you, Cecilia. Bapak Direktur Konservasi Energi dari Kementerian ESDM dan Ibu Direktur Mitigasi KLHK, please apologize myself to presenting this presentation in English. I didn't.
Mbak Nur, Bu Nur, please help Bu Herlin to prepare the presentation material, please. Thank you.
Thank you. As introduced by the moderator, today I am presenting myself as an ASRI Indonesia Chapter Board of Governors, and I am very happy that Pak Rama, who is also one of ASRI Indonesia Chapter Board of Governors member, is here. I believe he will enhancing our discussion with his amazing experiences in HVAC system. So I would like to share with you what is the best technology for cooling system for this post-COVID-19 era. Next, please. I would like to take this opportunity also to share this important information about ASRE position regarding COVID-19 issues, especially on its relation with HVAC in buildings. Everybody welcome to visit our website asre.org/COVID-19. This site actually provided a guidance for drafting policies and decision consideration for our stakeholders. For further information, please visit this official website. Actually, we provide a lot of important information in this site. Next, please. ASRE leadership on this pandemic situation has approved this statement that transmission of COVID-19 through the air is sufficiently like that airborne exposure to virus should be controlled. So changes to building operation, including the operation of HVAC systems, can reduce airborne exposures. Ventilation, filtration provided by HVAC system can reduce airborne concentration of COVID-19 and those of risk transmission through the air before. So you can see this information completely in our website also. Next, please. So we can be briefly seen that HVAC improvement might take place in most of commercial buildings such as hotels, hospitals, offices, schools, and other public facilities in Indonesia because as we know that previously we didn't consider indoor air quality as better as today. Yeah. But please consider that this aspect improvement post-COVID-19 is only expected to lower the infection risk, not to overcome all this COVID-19. Yeah, it is only to lower the risk. We can consider this option for improvement. You can put in room disinfection system, or you can also choose dilution ventilation zone, pressurization, everything optimize airflow pattern, directional airflow. So you can change airflow in your rooms. General exhaust ventilation, as you know, today everybody think about the exhaust ventilation and the new fresh air for the buildings, and central system filtration as well as UVGI control and controlling in the indoor temperature and humidity. So there are a lot of technology provider available already in Indonesia market that we can access. So all those technology you can have. It is already available in Indonesia. Next, please. So with all this improvement option, of course, we lead to a thought of invest additional cooling system. Yeah. Let's see what is consideration that we should have for this next future plan for HVAC system. As you have to improve your indoor air quality, everybody will think about the additional cooling capacity, of course. Next, please. Please use, thinking about this specific technology, there is no doubt that we should use some consideration. Some of this consideration is please use heat recovery as a pre-cooling for additional fresh air. Everybody already know in buildings in Indonesia, fresh air is very limited, and if you see in our COVID-19 website, ASRE COVID-19, we give you recommendation that we need to have 20% of fresh air. Previously, we can have only 10% of fresh air, but now after this COVID-19, we need 20% of fresh air. And think also about no cost improvement of chiller plant, not only chiller, but chiller plant. I think Pak Rana can explain about it furthermore, because I have a very limited time for my presentation. Please do not think about the additional cooling load caused by the additional fresh air, but Pak Rana will introduce a lot more experiences about this no cost improvement. And please consider also energy consumption of this new improvement system. And you might have a cooling system replacement with high energy efficient technology, of course, and environmental friendly refrigerants such as PRF, oil-free technologies, and please use also the refrigerant that with zero DP and low GWP like R32, HFO, or natural refrigerants. Next, please. So, talking about cooling system-based technology, if you should have a new system, please use your first consideration on refrigerant selections. Bu Emma, of course, will ask you how to choose the best refrigerant from today to the next future. Yeah, you may choose the zero ODP like I mentioned before, and low GW. So it will be better if you can choose a refrigerant with the GWP lower than 700. And next consideration is on cooling system technology. Of course, you can choose PRF technology. As you know that we need to have improvement for hospitality in hotels. Yeah, and mostly they still use AC split, hotels and hospital. Please also consider that you use PRF technology. And for this PRF technology, we have problems with fresh air. Maybe if it is wall-mounted PRF system, but you can have modification on your rooms for using this split PRF technology. And for the bigger building, high-rise buildings, you can consider to use oilless technology in the. Yeah, it is a good option because regarding of this technology is the highest, has the highest COP, and this technology has less maintenance cost and suitable for building with a very low part load. So it is for bigger hotel, for 5-star hotel, and might also for bigger high-rise building offices. Next, please. Talking about the investment, actually ASRE has an energy code. It is very important tools for us to make an appropriate decision on HVAC investment in energy cost calculation method, as it is well known that the HVAC system energy cost is actually the highest cost in the investment. Yeah. You could use ASRE standard 19.1. This standard has been the benchmark for commercial building energy codes and a key basis for codes and standards around the world for more than 35 years. The standard provides you energy efficient design, including energy cost budget method of most buildings, except or low-rise residential buildings. And you might already know a method like life cycle cost analysis or any kind of energy cost budget method. It is a sustainable HVAC system investment calculation method with two advantages, of course. For low carbon cooling with best investment consideration scenarios. Next, please. So if you see from this slide, you can see how is the true cost of HVAC investment. If you see from the pie chart on the right side, the front cost is only 31%, comparing with it is very less than the operational cost. This blue part is energy costs, including energy costs, repair and maintenance. So it is put that we calculate for 50 years because we consider about the building life cycle, not the chiller plant lifetime. It is the building lifetime. So as our recommendation for you, next slide please. Our recommendation for you is please consult with a good knowledge consultant about HVAC sustainable design for improving existing HVAC system for new investment. If front costs become today's constraint, we know that business is very down today. Please try also to find cooling investment scenario options to still have low carbon HVAC system, and please also consider indoor air quality standard. It is already a must to have in every commercial buildings. Next, please. So that's ASRE advancing the arts and science of heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, refrigeration, and their allied fields. Thank you. Please visit our website. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ibu Erlin, for highlighting the role of improvements in HVAC systems in reducing the risks of COVID-19 transmission and providing us an overview of the status of efficient and low carbon cooling technologies in Indonesia, and for also highlighting some of the financing challenges the sector is facing under the additional constraints of the economic slowdown caused by the pandemic. This brings us into our final presentation, which comes from James Maguire and Peter Hobson at SDCL, a privately owned and government-backed institutional investment management firm, who between them have many decades of experience structuring clean energy and sustainable infrastructure projects in Asia, Europe, Central Asia, and Africa. Jim and Peter will provide us the perspective from the investor and finance sector, as well as introduce us to the cooling as a service financing model. Jim, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Cecilia. Thank you to the various representatives from Indonesian government, and thank you to the OECD. My name is Jim Maguire. I'm a partner at SDCL based in Hong Kong, and we are a funder of cooling and energy efficiency projects. What I want to talk about today in just the next couple of slides is, notwithstanding the comments that have been made by the IEA, talking about higher wealth. What we would like to do is frame the discussion on cooling and energy efficiency within the context of the impact of COVID-19 and look at it on a sector basis or a sectoral basis of the hospitality sector. What we hope is we can put across a message that cooling and energy efficiency is actually an option for not only improving financial performance and environmental performance, but helping economic recovery in Indonesia. So if we go to the next slide. I'm not sure if we've got a chance locally.
Wait, I ask the operator to show your screen.
It's a share screen, not the operators. It's a share screen from the Jim himself.
Bahannya udah ada di Mbak Nur, Pak Irwan.
Bear with me.
Bahannya nggak ada di Mbak Nur, bahannya langsung dari Jim. Jadi udah di co-host, udah di co-host. Di Jim jadi co-host, jadi sudah bisa share screen sendiri.
Jim, I can share screen from my end if that helps.
Peter, I'm trying. Yeah, if you wouldn't mind, if you can get it on.
Let's give that a go. Okay.
Fantastic, Peter.
And I'm on the wrong slide, so everybody don't look at this one, please, because this is coming later. I'll go back up to the beginning. Close your eyes for a second. There we go.
That's for everybody's reference. Those are Peter's slides, and he was just trying to get in early. What I'd like to, and this slide is in line with many of the slides which have already been shown for everybody. And I just want to highlight again and reinforce the hospitality sector in Indonesia is the #2 sector for commercial air conditioning, and not by much. Office and buildings is 36.2%, and hospitality represents 35.3%. And I'd also like to then look at it on a growth trajectory for Indonesia. When we look at hospitality, we're talking about a 7% compounded annual growth rate over the next 10 years out to 2030. And again, that's second only to buildings at 7.9%. So when we look at commercial air conditioning in Indonesia, we're looking at a couple of different demand drivers as well. And it's important that that's elucidated. We talk about the temperature and the heat waves, which has been highlighted by many of the previous speakers. But we're also looking at electricity prices. And then we also look at, again, this issue of hospitality and the fundamental role that hospitality plays in the economy. The next slide, please, Peter. Peter, could you do the next slide, please? Sorry.
Sure. Sorry, I thought I had Jim. So is it not picked up?
Perfect. One too many.
Okay.
One too many. Is there a way? Yeah, go back one more. Just one more. And I'll be quick on this slide for the participants on this call. The important thing to highlight is we are a grantee under the Kigali Cooling Efficiency Program. Our grant, the objective of our grant, is to mobilize $100 million in capital. And that is to be focused on cooling and energy efficiency projects. And specifically, as Kevin has highlighted, we're looking at HFCs. We're looking at reducing the production and the consumption of HFCs. And we want to drive innovation and economic opportunity in that air conditioning space, in that air conditioning and refrigeration space. And when we look at Kigali Cooling Efficiency Program, the principal methodology, the principal investment framework that we want to deploy across Indonesia, across Asia, is this cooling as a service, okay? And it is a new business model for this sector, but it is very much borrowing from something which Indonesia knows well, which is project finance. And what we're looking at with cooling as a service and under the Kigali Cooling Efficiency Program, we're looking at cooling equipment which is supplied, which is financed and supplied and installed to customers with no upfront payment. It is, if you will, a pay for use or pay per use structure. Next slide, please, Peter. So when we look at this COVID-19 impact and the path to recovery, a couple of quick comments, right? Globally, what we're seeing is a hotel industry which is growing massively. It has grown and continues to grow. When we look at Asia specifically, we look at 2019, where the transactions around the hospitality sector were the largest in the history of Asia since they've been recording it. And then we look at energy use within the context of the hospitality sector, right? Representing 3 to 6% of operating costs and accounting for about 60% of CO2 emissions. So on a global basis, we're looking at a sector, the hospitality sector, where we see a significant impact from COVID-19, we see no end in sight. And what we are suggesting is that the CAS model, the cooling as a service model, is something that we can apply across hospitality and across other sectors of the economy, manufacturing, healthcare, and real estate and property. But
excuse me, Jim and Peter, please put it on the slideshow because the participant cannot read. It's unreadable. Please, thank you.
Apologies. Is that better? I'm going from what I see on the screen here.
The participant cannot read. The participant cannot read. Okay. So please, would you like to please put it on the slideshow to enlarge the PowerPoint?
Well, that's just what I did, I'm afraid. Sorry. So there it's on the slideshow now on my screen. And so I'm hoping it's the same on your screens. Cecilia, can you confirm if you're seeing the slideshow?
No, I'm still showing it in a preview mode, but I believe it's in the Google Docs drive. So I'm hoping participants can download it and follow directly on their computers if we are not able to overcome this technical issue.
I think you can try to click enable editing, then preview, please. Thanks.
And close the left side windows, please.
Okay, so does that work? Again, it's
yeah, that's
good now, Peter.
That's better.
Okay, great. Jim and I are very good at financing cooling projects, but we're lousy at doing presentations, so apologies.
We would not be working for Azurian anytime soon. But just to continue, when we look then at the Indonesian hospitality sector, we look specifically at Indonesia. We're looking at, as I said, it's the #2 user of cooling technology, in Indonesia behind offices and buildings. As the cooling demand soars, and Kevin Lane was highlighting this point, right? And as we have more cooling degree days, the need to retrofit old plant and equipment, and as well as Ibu Erlin has mentioned, to move to lower GWP refrigerants will become that much more important for Indonesia. I borrowed from a study which came out in March 2020, looking at the impact of COVID-19 to the hospitality sector in Indonesia, and a few quick comments to highlight, right? The majority of hotels thought occupancy performance would be down 25 to 50% in the first half year on year. And 25% thought that the third quarter, would be greater than 50% year on year. Large volume of the hotels thought their total revenue would be down year on year, 25 to 50% in that first half. And then 38% of the hotels saw labor costs as their greatest concern, but 28% saw utility cost, electricity. So what we're positing, what we're suggesting for Indonesia is, when we look at the impact of COVID-19 across the hospitality sector, we see cooling efficiency as a way to move forward to help and support economic recovery. And where we feel that will be easiest is when we get to a point where cooling efficiency in hospitality is brand standard, right? And we see that this is fundamental because cooling is one of the largest contributors to climate change and accelerating a warming planet. So Peter, just the next slide. And so I just want to highlight a couple of preliminary conclusions, and this is based on the work we've done under the Kigali Cooling Efficiency Program, and specifically in the Indonesian hospitality sector. We're seeing that there is a tremendous opportunity to drive cost savings, improve profits, and improve performance for the plant and equipment, the infrastructure of the hospitality sector, right? We're seeing it's a massive opportunity. And there's a study done by the Economist Intelligence Unit, which has been highlighted in the other presentations, $135 billion. We are seeing that the cost of capital, we're seeing an absolute need for us as an investor, as a private capital investor, to bring public entities and or international financial institutions to support this process. The impact from a credit exposure, from a non-payment risk, is so far right now proving to be untenable for private investors to come into this sector. We think that the risk assessment should be on a sectoral basis, not just individual hotels. We want to finance across 100 hotels. We don't want to finance just asset by asset, hotel by hotel. So the quicker, the sooner that we can get to a framework, we're looking at scale, gives us the opportunity to deploy capital. We think that'll be the more efficient and the best way to move forward, okay? So then I come back and just want to highlight the findings that we have from our work. We have funded 3 investment grade audits that have been completed. We have a 4th investment grade audit that has been suspended due to COVID-19. In those 3 projects, we're looking at aggregate investment of about 1.45 million across the 3 projects. The early findings from the investment grade audits, we were looking at project savings in US dollars of just under $300,000 per year. And we're looking at projected savings on a kilowatt basis of 3.3 million. And just for reference, the simple payback for each of those projects, 4.73 years, 5.43 years, and 5 years. So we, from an investor perspective, we are comfortable with that. Secondly, I want to highlight that again, and Ibu Erlin spoke about this, the need for the OEMs to do a better job producing and introducing lower GWP refrigerant technology in the region is fundamental. Our experience has been in Indonesia and other parts of Southeast Asia is that perhaps the OEMs can do a better job in this process of taking HFCs out and introduction of HFO or lower GWP refrigerants. I also want to make reference to a comment that, again, Ibu Erlin referenced, is indoor air quality. We are seeing a clear link between cooling and energy efficiency and indoor air quality. And my suggestion, our belief is, based on the early findings, the tourism sector, tourists themselves will drive change in Indonesia's hospitality sector. And the asset owners, as well as global brands, to be fair, they need to rethink what guests value most. And the COVID-19 risk, which is now being more closely seen as transportable by air, is something that has to be factored into the discussions as the hospitality sector in Indonesia moves forward. Finally, this issue of brand standard. We see the need for cooling efficiency to be brand standard. It must represent the new normal in the hospitality sector. And last, the national or the role of national or regional governments, of international financial institutions in this provision of partial risk sharing guarantees or non-payment to address the credit default risk is fundamental. I'm going to stop there and I'm going to transfer back to Peter, who has control of the screen, just to take us through the cooling as a service framework in a bit more detail. Peter.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you. Great warm up, Jim. Thank you. So I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to go through the next couple of slides pretty quickly and then focus on the final one for a slightly longer discussion. But first of all, just to kind of illustrate, it's already been mentioned today by previous speakers, the ESCO concept as it applies to cooling as a service. And this is the diagram here just sets out what that looks like commercially. And for those of you, and I'm sure many of you have looked at ESCO activity before, this will be a very familiar diagram. It's exactly the same as the one for ESCOs doing any other type of energy efficiency project. And that's the key point here. Cooling as a service is really a very well-established commercial concept. It's just that it's not been so much applied to cooling equipment before. It's been more focused on energy efficiency, but commercially it's really exactly the same approach. We have a from the SDCL perspective, we generally would have a special purpose vehicle that's set up as a project company, and SDCL with our investors puts the capital required into that company, and then we arrange for an ESCO in the traditional sense to be contracted as the delivery partner to implement the project and to operate it. And then that SPV enters into a cooling as a service agreement, or possibly an energy efficiency and cooling as a service agreement with the client, and he's paid a service charge based on the performance of the project. And the advantage of that approach from the ESCO perspective is that it can get on with doing the job that it does well, which is implementing and running the projects without having to worry about finding the capital. From our investors' perspective, we have an investment vehicle that delivers good returns, and from the host company's perspective, they have a single point of contact with an entity that's fully capable of delivering the product it's supposed to deliver, and concentrates only on doing that. So it's a very traditional ESCO type approach, and it works perfectly for cooling as a service projects. And this slide really just takes the same thing and expands it time-wise in a way to just illustrate. Again, it's a one-stop shop. So it's a single point of responsibility for all parts of project delivery and implementation through feasibility, design and engineering, resulting in the energy services agreement, and hanging off that on the delivery side of the project management energy performance contract and operating and maintenance contracts. All of those delivered through the single SPV approach. So there's a single point of responsibility, and where all the risk is taken, so that the client really only has one counterparty and a very clear service delivery program that's well set out in the contract. It pays for what's delivered, and it doesn't have to fund anything upfront itself. It doesn't have to have anything on its own balance sheet. It's a true service-based approach. So these are concepts I think many of you will have seen. And really what we're trying to emphasize here is that it's no different in the cooling sector. We're very happy to elaborate on any of these aspects in questions or follow up afterwards. Now, this next slide just starts to look at how to break down some of the risks associated with that. And again, this is all dealt with within the basic framework. But the sort of four main areas of risk, the host credit risk, which is that the client is unable to pay. Now, we'll come back to that one because that's very important in terms of the current COVID-19 situation. And then the other three risks are the standard performance, technology, and operating and maintenance risk. And without going into the detail of this now, because you can look at the slides later, those are all covered within the contractual structure that's part of the cooling as a service package. And essentially, the risks are allocated to the party most suited to mitigating them. So the technology and the operating and maintenance risks, although they're in the first instance carried by the special purpose vehicle, because if we fail on those aspects, we don't get paid, they're backed off to the EPC and the O&M partners, as is performance risk through the obligations of the ESCO. So the point about all of that is that the different risks can be allocated to the correct parties, and all of that is managed through the contractual structure of centered on the SPV. Now, going back to the host credit risk, this is normally something that's a relatively straightforward part of the equation, because it's very easy to get a credit analysis done of the host, and we're finance guys, so we know how to do that. So we can make a judgment about what the credit risk of the host is and decide in the first instance whether we're going to go ahead with the project or not. And that's normally what's done as part of the initial investment assessment that we have to go through with our credit committees. And that's the normal part of doing ESCO business from a financing company's perspective. challenge we have at the moment is COVID-19 has thrown a factor into all of this. It's extremely difficult to make any kind of normal credit analysis over, and this is really now, you know, the main obstacle in trying to figure out how to put long-term commercial financing into key economic sectors, you know, like the hospitality sector, which, as we can all imagine, and we know from seeing the news and maybe even trying to go on holidays, is very, very adversely impacted by COVID-19, both in the medium term and potentially and likely through into the longer term as well, from the simple consequences of people not being able to take advantage of hospitality sector services. And so in the next slide, we've set out some thoughts about how that might be approached. And this is really the central part of our discussion today, is how we and other key stakeholders can address the impact of COVID-19 on the credit impact on the hospitality sector. And if we look at what the traditional instruments are that can be brought to bear here, we're talking about partial risk guarantees, partial credit guarantees, and so on and so forth, which can be provided traditionally by insurance companies, but not only by insurance companies. Different structured finance instruments can be prepared to share these kind of risks. We've all heard of export credit guarantees, which are a key part of it, but they generally address the delivery, installation, and commissioning risk of sort of key parts of plant and equipment. And the IFIs and the multilateral lenders also have within their mandate the scope to enter into different types of risk sharing and risk participation agreements. And there are many, and there are almost as many ways of doing that as there are, you know, actual projects. So there are those kind of solutions out there, and they can be structured to deliver the type of risks associated with COVID-19. For example, having a period of cover for the next 1, 2, or 3 years while the initial impacts kind of work out, and then falling away as things get back to kind of normal commercial conditions, for example. So there's different ways of structuring risk participation to be suited to the impact of COVID-19 on a particular sector, and they can also be structured to only cover certain risks, you know, associated directly with coronavirus, and not others, as technical performance risks can be dealt with through normal commercial mechanisms. And the key point about the need for all of that is these kind of support systems will underpin the mobilization of equity and debt capital to drive the economic recovery within the sector and the wider economy. And as has been mentioned by a number of speakers already this morning, you know, we know that the potential for labour mobilisation is very high through implementing energy efficiency projects, and more generally within the green finance sector, as opposed to the kind of more traditional mega project infrastructure sector. There's enormous potential for green recovery, and a requirement within that for specific risk sharing instruments to address the what essentially is a non-payment risk associated with COVID-19. And then the final, and I think really key point about this, is that the traditional approaches for risk sharing through insurance, through IFIs, through export credit guarantees are extremely important, but they don't have to be constrained to those stakeholders. And as we ourselves are here because the KSEP program has been able to provide grant funding to SDCL and other grantees involved in energy efficiency cooling. And those kind of financial resources can also be deployed to support risk sharing instruments, first loss guarantees, and these kind of things. And there's absolutely no reason why sovereign IFIs, philanthropic stakeholders asset owners and crucially global brands can't be a part of that. And that's one of the things that we're working on very hard at SDCL, is to bring all of these different stakeholders together to try and structure the appropriate optimal risk sharing instruments that will enable that system of support to be put in place to mobilize the huge levels of equity and debt capital that are needed to finance cooling projects in Indonesia and in the region. Just to finish, one of the really important things to emphasize is this need not be huge amounts of money, a relatively small financing pot of, let's say, 5 to 10 million as a form of first loss guarantee or a specific risk sharing instruments can go a very long way in mobilizing 10 to 20 times that amount of commercial finance. So, it can have a very, very high leverage effect. And one of the arguments that we're bringing to some of the global hospitality brand companies that we're speaking to is at the HQ level, if they can deploy some of the capital resources they have available in this sort of way, then they can get a huge amount of leverage from that in terms of the additional finance that it will mobilize from third parties to benefit the hotels in their groups. So that's really the key message that Jim and I are bringing today. We have the capital, we have the commercial structures, but we all need help and support in highly targeted financing support to address the specific risks of COVID-19 on the hospitality and other parts of the economy, in order to unlock the enormous green finance potential that there is available. And so I'll wrap up there. We're very, very happy to take questions, and of course we'll share these slides in due course, so you'll have a little bit more detail, and we'll be happy to follow up down the line in the weeks to come as well. So I'll finish on that. The last slide is just to kind of summarize SDCL. Very quickly, we're an international sustainable fund manager. We have offices in the UK, Ireland, Hong Kong, actually, and New York, not Singapore, and investment vehicles in each of those countries. We have a listed company on the London Stock Exchange called SEIT, which stands for SDCL Energy Efficiency Income Trust. And that invests globally in energy efficiency projects. And Jim and I are working very hard on a dedicated instrument for cooling efficiency in the Asia region that we're hoping to put in place by the end of this year. So we're very much focused on delivering or raising capital to deliver into energy and cooling efficiency projects globally and in Asia in particular. So thank you very much for your attention, and we're looking forward to further discussions. Thank you, Cecilia.
Thank you very much, Jim and Peter, for that excellent presentation and explanation of the projects. So now I'd like to thank also all of our speakers for their excellent presentations, and to remind participants to send in their questions via the chat function. We already have a number of questions, which I will now pass on. The first one to all speakers is, what is the minimum project value for energy financing schemes that are available for cooling? I don't know, perhaps Jim or Peter, if you want to take this one, or Ibu Erlin.
Yeah, I can just very quickly say, I mean, it depends on who you are to some extent. If you're going to talk to one of the major IFIs, it's some tens of millions, and so that's, we're doing that. But the structures that we have are designed to be able to fund a large number of smaller projects underneath that, and so some of those are typically in the range of a few $100,000 up to a few $1 million, and that's the kind of range that we're looking at. And very often they're with a global group or a corporate entity that might have 10, 20 or 30 potential projects within its portfolio. So doing one project that's maybe $200,000 or $300,000 is quite effective when you can easily replicate that with the same structure across the corporate portfolio. As a standalone, one-off project, even for us, something much less than $1 million can be quite expensive to put together, depending on the kind of project characteristics. So as a pure standalone one-off project, the starting point will probably be around $500,000-ish, but it's not a hard line. And of course, it all depends on the particular circumstances and merits of the project.
Thank you very much. Ibu Erlin, would you like to add something to that?
As we are only association, actually we don't have any suggestion for that scheme, but ASRE will provide you advice, technical advice for sustainable technology if you need. So please ask ASRE Indonesia check that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, another question. This is to Pak Haryanto and or to Ibu Emma. Indonesia, as far as we are aware, is part of the Montreal Protocol and the Kigali Amendment to phase out HFCs and consequently improving the COP of air conditioners as well. What is the status of ratifying this convention to Indonesia's regulation? Ibu Emma, would you like to respond?
I have my presentation in my session. Maybe I can inform you that.
All right, very good. Thank you very much for that. So we'll come back to this question in your remarks in the discussant session. Now, a couple of questions that were directed to Kevin. One of them he's already answered in the chat, but perhaps he would like to elaborate a little bit on this. Kevin, I'll just read you out the questions now. First of all, how important is it to improve cooling efficiency in terms of tackling climate change? And then secondly, if you could elaborate a little bit on the energy efficiency implementation to address the pandemic economic impacts or the green recovery, and whether these assumptions that you highlighted in your presentation about high employment potential is valid for all countries?
Okay, yeah, thanks for those questions. I'll put a couple of links in the chat box, but in brief, if we try to meet our climate goals, essentially we're trying to decarbonize society pretty heavily by, say, 2050. So if we want to cut our emissions from, say, 33 gigatons per annum at the moment, so we're emitting a lot of carbon, we have to cut that dramatically over the next 30 years. If we're going to do that, if we don't have energy efficiency, there's no chance that we're going to get there. So efficiency is pretty much the key component of meeting that. So in the short term, efficiency will have to play a much bigger role. So it could be even half of the emissions abatements is going to have to come from energy efficiency. In the longer term, we can use more renewables. There might be other options to decarbonize, maybe even remove some carbon from the atmosphere. But without efficiency, we're not going to meet those climate goals. So it's essential, is what I would say. And the IEA being called it the first fuel in terms of reducing it. It's also one of the very low cost and sometimes even a negative cost. So efficiency you can actually be making money from, reducing emissions. And as such, that's why we've even got cooling as a service. So there is money to be made from installing more efficient equipment. So that's why there is a business model around that, or one of the reasons. In terms of cooling, in terms of efficiency, we expect a very dramatic rising in the uptake of cooling around the globe. So if we're using, say, 2,000 terawatt hours now, by 2050, that could be as high as, say, 6,000 terawatt hours, so tripling. So it's absolutely huge amounts of cooling is going to be needed. So if we don't have efficiency, then that will also yeah, mean that there's no chance of meeting our climate goals. So efficiency for both cooling and in general for lighting, cars, houses, all other products is essential. In terms of the green recovery, so what we're seeing at the moment, we expect energy consumption is going to fall by, say, 5-6% over the next year globally. GDP is also falling as well, so we are seeing a drop in emissions. So that's, but that's all due to economic activity declining. It's not a structural change; we've got more efficiency. So green recovery packages are going to be essential, and we're seeing governments around the world are starting to introduce those. So Europe, for example, 2 days ago agreed a $750 billion deal to try and jumpstart the economy. So the idea of this is to try and have some conditions on the bailout money to try not only improve employment and keep the economy going, but it's also to ensure that a proportion of that money is going into sustainable recovery, so building back better. So for the European example, 30% of those funds are actually going to be targeted towards green solutions. So some of that will go into more effective, cooling solutions as well. So it's essential that a lot of those packages do focus on a green recovery as well. And the plus side of it is if you're going to put it into a green package, a lot of those will be on industries such as renewable technologies, energy efficiencies. And the plus side is that they're very high in terms of job creation, generating new jobs for every $1 million invested. They're a lot higher than if you say subsidizing or building new power plants, for example, or traditional power plants. So efficiency, again, is going to be very important in terms of those green recovery packages. And there's a couple of links on there. And in my presentation, the last slide, there's a couple of links as well, which links to a couple of useful reports, both in terms of efficiency and green recovery, and some of the KSEP reports that Jim mentioned as well. So there's some interesting projects in there.
Thank you very much, Kevin. And a follow-up link to this question about employment and one of the participants asked if it's possible to estimate how much employment can be created in the case of the 4 investment grade audits that you had highlighted. Kevin, did you want to add something more to that?
I'll briefly add to that, and there's a sub-question to the previous one, that these job creations, we expect that there will be a difference in different regions. So in emerging economies, the job creation is likely to be higher per every $1 million invested. The way we did those figures were based looking at so-called input-output tables. So we just look at the national statistics, see what's happening in the different sectors and what's the value of the sectors. In the labor statistics, you can get a good idea of what's the employment by types of activity. However, I think the question's almost asking for these projects, can we get even more detailed data or better data? So we could use our top scaling factors, but actually for some of these projects, if there's a more detailed evaluation, there is an opportunity, I guess, to see what those jobs really are. But I guess it's best CDL to see whether they would be able to get that sort of information or if they're trying to collect those. I don't know if Jim wanted to follow up or anyone else at SCD. I suspect that's not part of the evaluation, but maybe have some thoughts on if you could understand what the employment implications for introducing these. I suppose you're employed and Peter as well, but there'll be lots of other employment.
Thanks, Kevin. Jim?
Cecilia, we're not tracking that information, but I think intuitively, I think Kevin's spot on. If we're looking at the ecosystem of potential employment hiring that will go on in the course of a project where you're replacing chillers or replacing LED lighting, I think that the economic impact that's consequential to the investment, Kevin used the phrase, I think, of just $1 million investment, you're going to be driving employment. And if we're looking at the hospitality sector in Indonesia, we'll be driving employment in, if it's Bali and, in both city, urban environments, but also in other, I don't want to say rural, but outside of the main city centers in the resort areas as well. So I think the simple fact is that investment will have a multiplier effect in terms of other activities, economic activities, but also just purely and simple employment, getting people on site, getting people to hiring contractors and subcontractors. So I think it's a pretty net positive gain for a city, or a non-urban area.
Thank you, Jim. And we're going to stay. Sorry, yes, Kevin?
I'll just add one additional point to that. So yeah, investing in more efficient cooling and retrofits is as our executive director called it, a jobs machine. Energy efficiency, it really does generate more jobs. And not only the direct jobs from installing the equipment and the maintenance and the like, there's also, if it's more efficient equipment that's installed, there'll be more money saved at the end of it, which will then go back into the economy. So that's induced jobs from that. So there's actually additional money goes in to spending to other parts of the economy. So it's an additional benefit there.
Thank you very much, Kevin. Now, Jim, I have a relatively long question that you were also sent directly from Pakran. I will try to quickly summarize it. The question is around the saving schemes for the ESCO payment models. There is an assumption proposed that in the scenario for the ESCO's projects, he would like to that are made, the two options are guaranteed savings and the shared savings scheme. He is assuming that the methodology of financing is close to an ESCO scenario with the guaranteed savings type of scheme. With this scenario, when there's a need for a guarantor, which is still quite rare in Indonesia, from his point of view, for a developing country like Indonesia, it is more suitable to apply a shared savings model. If this is possible, and he would like to propose to change the payment scenario from installment to shared saving payment scenarios, and would like to know what your thoughts are on this particular comment. I apologize if I have not represented well this question. Jim, do you want to respond to that?
Sure. No, I'll kick off, and I'm sure Peter will want to add his 2 cents. I'll be brief. I live in Hong Kong, as I mentioned, and having looked at energy efficiency for just north of 15 odd years, where when an energy savings performance contracting structure, in my experience, it comes down to continuous debate between the host and the actual ESCO as to the verified savings. First point. So I think you tend to get bogged down in an ESPC structure versus the ESCO structure, or ESCO model, or cooling as a service, I'll call it, on sort of what I would call non-productive activity. I think what Peter mentions on at a couple of points, and what I'll reinforce, is we're looking at deploying capital at scale. So for us, the objective is not to work with one hotel, it's to work with 100 hotels. And when we look at it when we aggregate those projects, though they may be smaller, they may be $500,000 US or $300,000 US, when we aggregate them on a sectoral basis, what we're looking at is an opportunity to finance at scale with standardized contracts in a programmatic fashion. And from our perspective, certainly from my own personal bias, the cooling as a service, or the ESCO model, is a much more efficient way to deploy capital. And when we talk about the purpose of today's discussion, when we're looking at hospitality sector, Indonesia, how do we jumpstart the recovery process in Indonesia? I believe that the ESCO, or cooling as a service model, is a more effective model to move Indonesia forward. Peter, I don't know if you want to chime in.
Thanks, Jim. Yeah, just to say that they're really just variants of the same central theme. Of course, it's important to emphasize that. What I would say is that a shared saving structure isn't always quite as elegant as it sounds, because it requires a lot of monitoring and verification, and there's a lot of scope for dispute over exactly how to define those savings. And when we have an awful lot of variables at play in terms of things like occupancy and different demand inputs and factors, it can get quite messy to make that sort of work effectively. So from the point of view of effectively as an investor, guaranteed saving approach is much more straightforward. But it's also important to emphasize that that sort of guarantee aspect is really about performance guarantee. It's a technical guarantee, really, which is a quite straightforward thing to sort out with your technical partners. So it's not as financially onerous as it sounds. And this sort of equipment is pretty reliable. It does what it's supposed to do, and it performs very reliably for a long period of time if it's properly maintained. So a guaranteed saving approach, it's a lot more flexible and adaptable and applicable than it's sometimes portrayed. And a shared saving approach isn't always quite as straightforward and as flexible as we'd all like it to be. So, these two factors have got to be kept in mind, which have to be practical and pragmatic.
Thank you very much. So we're going to end this Q&A session with one final question that we have received via those watching on YouTube. The participant is asking, what are the requirements for an ESCO to receive a grant for an energy efficiency project, and how can we as the ESCO apply for such a grant? The question was not directed at any particular speaker, but perhaps this may be best suited to be replied by the Ministry of Energy. Bapak Haryanto, is this something that you can respond to?
Sorry, Cecil, can you repeat this question?
Yes, of course. The question comes from a company which is an ESCO who wants to set up an ESCO in Indonesia. And the question is, what are the requirements for an ESCO to receive a grant for an energy efficiency project? And how can this company as an ESCO apply for such a grant?
Okay, thank you. Regulation regarding to the ESCO is until now is not yet available. Actually, as I mentioned that we just preparing the regulation that also put the energy performance contract business in this regulation, which is revision of government regulation 70 and energy conservation. Previously we have the regulation, but this is more for registration of the ESCO, and we don't know, we didn't elaborate yet the regulation according to the ESCO, but after we hope that after we revise the government regulation, then we can follow it up with elaborate regulation in ESCO. Until now, the ESCO business is still business to business, like private company, but not for public facilities. Thank you.
Thank you very much for responding. Now that ends our Q&A session. And to help us wrap up our meeting, we have invited 3 experts from government, the finance sector, and industry to provide some of their takeaways and reactions to our discussion today. First, I'd like to start with Ibu Emma Rachmawati, Director of Mitigation at the Ministry of Environment and Forestry. If you could also respond to one of the questions we had received via the chat about the status of ratification of the Montreal Protocol and the new Kigali Amendment to phase out HFCs and improve COPs for air conditioning systems as well. Ibu Emma, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Cecile. Could I share some slides? Hello?
Yes, if we could make Emma co-host, then she should be able to share her screen.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, I have only 5 minutes, right?
Yes.
Okay. So as we are talking about cooling, so it is very much related with the use of refrigerant. So in this opportunity, of course, thank you very much for inviting me in this meeting. I would like to share with you the updates. So refrigerant is related with Vienna Convention and Montreal Protocol. So I prepared all these slides completely, but I only refer to some slides. So you can use the rest of the slides for your reference. So this is the process of implementation of the Montreal Protocol from ratification in year 1992 up to now. And this is the progress that we have, Decree of Minister of Industry number 41, year 2014, concerning the prohibition of the use of the HCFC in the AC and integral skin foam manufacturers since 1st January 2015. And we also have Decree of Minister of Trade number 18, year 2018, again with the same concern on the prohibition of import of HCFC-based equipment to Indonesia since 1st January 2015. And this is the progress on the HCFC phase out. The bar chart is the progress, and the line chart is the target that we have committed under the Montreal Protocol. So the achievement is below the target. This is the latest data in up to last year. So we are now calculating for the data for this year. Now this is the development of refrigerant. As we have discussed since beginning of this discussion this afternoon. On the right-hand side, there's the cycle that we start from the use of natural refrigerant, and then came to the SCFC, and then to SCFC, and then SFC, and now we are in consideration to back to use the natural refrigerant. With all those considerations. And if we are talking about the current situation, as also mentioned with the one participant asking the question on the Kigali Amendment. So we are now in the process of preparing of ratification for Kigali Amendment. So we have adopted this amendment in the meeting of parties in 15 October 2016. And this is, sorry. So this is the type of SFC that regulated in this amendment, and we have also the GWP and ODPs of some common refrigerants here for ODS and also SFC, HFO, and also natural refrigerant. This is also some reference that we see what in the practice in some countries. For example, here in EU, Japan, and Canada, where they use the for 2000, started in 2015 on the maximum GWP in each country for domestic refrigeration, commercial, industrial, and also residential, commercial, AC, and also MAC. Now, for Indonesia, we are under the Article 5 country under the Montreal Protocol. So we are in the group 1 of Article 5 countries. So we will have a reference for the baseline is the average production consumption for Indonesia. Of course, only consumption, because we do not produce any refrigerant. of HFC for 2020, 2021, and 2022, and additional 65% of baseline of product consumption in for Indonesia. So this is the phase down schedule. We start the freeze in 2024, and then we start the first one for the phase down for 10%, and then the other 30%, and then it will be completed in 2045 with 80% phase down. This is safety standards that we are also considering in using the alternatives of refrigerants. So we also not only refer to the efficiency, also the availability of technology in the market, also cost effectiveness, but also safety. We have SNE, in a national standard that we are referring for any product, and then this is, sorry, some it's still in Bahasa Indonesia. And what are we going to do towards the phase down of HFC, referring to the Kigali Amendment? One criteria that we have to establish is a licensing system and export-import procedures for HFC that have to be started from 1st January last year, when the Kigali Amendment entered into force. So we are developing this licensing system. And also at this moment, there is no any dedicated HS code development for SFC under WCO. I know that EU has proposed to have the technical committee under WCO, but Indonesia is in the position that we are waiting for the next cycle of the WCO meeting in 2022. This is also some discussion among ASEAN member states related with this HS code. Other thing on the HFC inventory, we are now having enabling activities to have a SFC inventory because we only refer in our HS code, we only use SFC under others, which is under 2990. That's for the SFC, and then under the 382 for the blended. So we have to collect other relevant information to ensure that this is relevant with the SFC that we are talking about. And then we are now preparing new regulation of control of consumption of DACs and their alternatives. And then having those in place, then we are then move forward to ratification of Kigali Amendment. So without those things are ready, we cannot ratify, because this is very different from ratifying a Paris Agreement and then ratifying Kigali Amendment. Because Kigali Amendments, once you ratified it, and then 3 months after the ratification, you have to report. Without those things ready, we cannot ratify it. And some important aspect is also related with the competence of the servicing sector. I will explain later in this slide. So this is our concern. Previously, we only have CFC as refrigerants, and then not too many options. And then we come to HCFC and then SFC, and now we are talking about other more environmentally friendly refrigerants, which is hydrocarbon, ammonia, carbon dioxide, and then many things. There are very different characteristics of these refrigerants that require very specific skills of technician that provide services to the operation of those equipment. So that's why the government consider that that's very important to improve the competence of this technician in servicing sector. So last year, Ministry of Manpower has established the ministerial decree number 41 year 2019 on standar kompetensi kerja nasional Indonesia, teknisi refrigerasi dan tata udara. So this is the kind of competence standard for the technician. And based on this standard, Minister Environment and Forestry also established law, ministerial decree number 73 year 2019. So on the qualification, work qualification, national work qualification, and also certification for competence of the technician for servicing for RAC. And then this include the certification scheme and also curriculum, syllabus, and then the test and also evaluation material. So this is my apology still in Bahasa Indonesia, but Cecilia, you can ask your colleague to translate. This is the content of ministerial decree of Minister Environment and Forestry with regard the certification for the technician. This is the step, the stages. This certification scheme has 5 steps from the very basic level from helper to the highest level of technician, senior project, and also supervisor, and chief engineer technician. And now talking about the first NDC, in our first NDC, we only focus on 3 gases, which is carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrogen oxide. So we have not yet included the HFC in our NDC. And to conclude, we are very supporting any effort to strengthen our capacity to implement the multilateral environmental agreements, whether UNFCCC or Montreal Protocol, to comply with relevant commitments. And Indonesia will include HFC as a new gas and new mitigation actions in our second NDC in 2025. As we will freeze in 2024 and we will phase down in to 2029, so we will include it in our second NDC. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ibu Emma, for your remarks. Next, I'd like to turn it over to Florian Kitt from the Asian Development Bank in Indonesia to provide his remarks.
Yes, hello everyone, and thanks Cecilia. My name is Florian Kitt. I'm energy specialist for Indonesia at the Asian Development Bank. I also coordinate the ADB's energy sector program in Indonesia. As an introduction, I know there are many friends online, so hello to everyone, Pak John, etc. Good to have a discussion on energy efficiency and especially energy efficiency financing. But just as a quick introduction, I don't have a presentation, so just allow me to speak a bit freely and comment on what I've heard before from our presenters as well. The Asian Development Bank is a multilateral financial institution. We have 68 member states. We are, as the name says, active in all of Asia, not in any other part of the world. We have about approximately a lending program of overall 35 to 40 billion a year. In Indonesia, we're financing about 2 to 4 billion a year. We are, I think, to start off with the COVID situation, thanks for the great presentations from around the table, from the IEA, from as well as sorry, I forgot your acronym, the Energy Efficiency Financing Institution from Singapore, as well as Pak Haryanto. I'm also very concerned about the impacts of COVID on the energy sector, which basically was an immediate reduction in efficiency. And we're looking forward to supporting the green recovery and think this is one of the really key topics to do. Apart from that, the ADB has been working on energy efficiency in Indonesia since about 2012. energy efficiency is very close to our heart. First of all, due to the urgent need to reduce the growth in energy consumption and demand, which in our view would save the government capital expenditure that would free up funding for other sectors like education and health, which are currently underfunded in Indonesia. As Pak Haryanto outlined in his great presentation in the beginning, we're working very closely with him and the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources on, I think, two of the key programs that were mentioned by most of the presenters. That's first of all, the energy efficiency service companies. So we're supporting the government currently in establishing a regulatory framework for energy efficiency service companies. To be able to enter the market, not just for private sector hospitality efficiency financing, but also for public sector energy efficiency financing with municipalities, state-owned enterprises, etc. In addition to that, we're strong believers in minimum energy efficiency performance standards. We think that better technology and the introduction of better technology can help a lot in bringing energy consumption of appliances down. And I think that goes for all sectors, industrial commerce, as well as the end user sector. We've focused so far on the end user sector. So together with Bapak Haryanto, we have established 4 new and minimum energy efficiency performance standards that we hope will be implemented into a legal framework by the government very soon. We're obviously ready to support the government as in the way forward to draw up additional energy efficiency performance standards and or strengthen and update the existing ones. I think it's very important. I think Jim mentioned that in his presentation, to also continuously update some of the standards to enforce continued improvement of technology and efficiency. We do think that the cooling sector has a role to play. We especially think that the cooling sector has a role to play in industry and business, as was mentioned, the hospitality sector. In the private end use sector, we think that there are other appliances that have way higher energy efficiency, energy consumption and energy efficiency gains in Indonesia currently, irons and others, just to note. We're a financing institution, as I mentioned. So in principle, we're very, very interested in financing energy efficiency projects. The problem is a bit in the details. And I think, Jim, thanks so much. I mean, you gave my presentation in principle. The first one, obviously, is project size. So the really key problem for the Asian Development Bank is that we need sizable projects. And sizable means 25, 50 million upwards. Otherwise, a small project is exactly the same processing cost for us and processing time as a large project. We have 3,500 people, so there's a limit what we can do in 68 countries. So we need to focus really on some of the big ticket items. The other thing is that I would need to mention about a financing institution like the ADB. We're basically a sovereign lender, and that means that the majority of our lending goes to government and government institutions, which allows us to lend at very cheap rates, currently LIBOR plus 50. We do have a smaller private sector arm, as do others, which can invest directly in private sector projects, maximum 25% of the project cost. That, however, is at commercial rates. So they apply a full risk review of the project and the borrower, upon which the risk committee would determine the rates. So that, first of all, given that currently in Indonesia, we're lacking a bit of a framework to really forcefully implement efficiency, we're having trouble financing. We have looked at the issue and we've come to the same conclusion as I think SDCL, which was that a guarantee scheme could really help both the public as well as the private projects. We've identified Indonesia and the public sector already has a guarantee mechanism, which is the Indonesia Investment Guarantee Fund. That, however, is only available for PPP projects, which is why we're currently working very closely with Pak Haryanto to ensure that energy efficiency service companies can engage in what Indonesia considers public-private partnerships in order for these projects to be able to get a guarantee, and that would basically be a payment guarantee from the Indonesia Investment Guarantee Fund. We also fully agree with SDCL that ideally to that should be added a partial credit risk guarantee. That could come from an institution like PTSME and or a private sector operator like Garantco, who is in Singapore. We had a number of discussions. Now, we would be obviously very supportive of widening such a scheme to the private sector and private sector projects, provided that either the government is willing to subsidize such guarantees to the private sector and to private sector projects, and or the private sector is willing to pay for that risk mitigation, which is obviously possible, for example, in a private sector operations, ADB or International Finance Corporation finance project. So I think in there, what we would need in the financing framework is a very, very clear government policy on either a sectoral level or a multi-sectoral level, how to provide financing for energy efficiency projects, provided this is deemed, especially at present, a full priority. That we would be able to support, obviously, with a loan to the government, for example, PTSMI or IIGF at LIBOR plus 50 rates, which then could be on lend to private sector companies. Let me just briefly come to the question that was asked, I think, by one of the ESCOs online. How would you be able to avail yourself of grants? So in this system that I've briefly outlined that the ADB would be able to support, obviously in terms of the climate mitigation impacts, we would be able to bring, or we could say in the private sector, on the private sector side, blend in bilateral or multilateral grant funding. That would obviously need to be a project that could verifiably establish that it really reduces a certain amount of greenhouse gas emissions. For one of our climate change funds, this would be a minimum of, I think, 12,500 tons of carbon emissions reduced per year over at least a 10-year time frame. Then you would be able to get a grant between 5 and 10 million. Now, these grants are not given on a company level. The grants are given on a project level, and they would need to be processed with or via an institution that has access to some of the international, multilateral, and bilateral funds. So just to advise, in Indonesia, the only accredited agency to the Green Climate Fund currently is PTSME. So PTSMI, which also funds, by the way, energy efficiency project, would be the first route for a private sector developer to discuss project financing, well, discuss how to finance a project and whether or not there would be a possibility to include a small scale amount of grant funding to fund the upfront cost for climate mitigation. But I think in any account, I would frame the question differently. It needs to be on a project scale. It needs to be for a very concrete project, and it wouldn't be for a specific company. It would be for, let's say, an SPV. That brings me again, just to round a bit up, aggregation. So the key problem would be to really aggregate and find a coalition of, I mean, Jim, John, you were talking about the hospitality sector. For us, it could also be the industry sector. It could be buildings to really bring them together. Now, this just makes things a little bit more complicated. And I think there is not that much market information currently in Indonesia. So what would also be needed is, I think, a lot of technical assistance and working together to establish a financing program, to establish the technical knowledge, especially at the level of the financing institutions that so far don't have any experience in energy efficiency financing. Let me stop here. I'm happy to come back again or answer any specific questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Florian, for those excellent remarks and highlighting the need for setting up a guarantee scheme. Also agree with you that we do need to work closer together in this particular focus group discussion is sort of our first efforts under our STEPHN program. So finally, in our sort of summary discussion session, last but not least, I'd like to invite Bapak Rana Yusuf Nasir, Vice Chairman of Maskia, President of ASHRAE and founder of the Green Buildings Council of Indonesia, to be our final discussant. Bapak Rana, please give us your perspective on the industry's readiness to deploy efficient and low carbon cooling systems. The floor is yours. Bapak Rana, you are still muted.
Yeah, okay. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cecilia. Okay, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, especially kepada yang terhormat Pak Haryanto sebagai Direktur dari Konservasi Energi, and also to all my friends, the distinguished speakers from Ibu Emma, Ibu Herlin, Kevin, Peter, Jim, Florian, and also all distinguished participants on this FGD. Good afternoon, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I'm Rana from Maskia, with Indonesian Society for Energy Conservation and Efficiency, and also the member of Board of Governors of ASHRAE Indonesia chapter. It is an honor for me to give more comment on this event today. And please allow me to start by sharing some comment about the subject delivered by the previous speakers. And I will talk especially for the available best technology and more technical issue, and it comes to a bit detail. Since on the term of reference, it mentioned about the post-pandemic of COVID-19, then from this angle, we have to talk about how to avoid the pandemic, especially in the cooling system. Since the cooling need an air distribution, a place for virus transmission. For your information, ASHRAE recommend to have a minimum of 2 ACH, air change per hour of fresh air, and also 10 ACH for the supply air, which means that the fresh air is about 20% of the supply air. The current practices, which is most of the people implement, is that we only have about the 7% of the supply air. So we need an additional fresh air that we have to put into the room. And it means that the cooling load will be increased and more critical since we are in the humid and hot country. To avoid this problem, we have two options. Option one is to use the recovery wheel, and the number two is using the DOAS, dedicated outside air system, with using the heat pump technology. Both technology makes, there is no addition on the cooling load for the chiller plant. No addition cooling load for the chiller plant. But the fresh air is also, it means that the fresh air is not an issue for the chiller plant cooling system. But however, the energy consumption is still increased due to the load from the outside air. And what is the difference between the two options, recovery and the DOAS? The recovery wheels have a bigger size. It means the price are more expensive, but the efficiency is better than the DOAS. But big size means it requires the big spaces. So this is a problem for existing facility, and therefore recovery wheels, from my point of view, is more appropriate for the new building or new construction. since you can prepare and provide with appropriate required space. On the other side, the DOAS has a smaller size. That's why the price is lower than the recovery wheels. And a smaller size means it's more appropriate for the existing building if we talk about the energy efficiency implementation on the hospitality sectors. Hopefully it could be fit on the existing and available space. The other issue I will raise is about that for a 5-star hotel and above, most of them are using a chiller system. And as we know that the R&D of the chillers is always looking for the new and the better technology chillers from time to time. And it means that also makes us that it is available that we can get a better technology with a better efficiency in the chillers in Lanchi. The newest chillers has a better, more better efficiency and also better on the energy consumption. And to make the chillers more efficient, the manufacturers provide the chillers with the inverter, which is control the rotation of the motor depend on the cooling load. As we know that on the hospitality sectors, the hotel has a very low part load. So then if we have a reduced cooling load inverter, an inverter will reduce the RPM, which makes the power of the motor, the energy consumptions will also reduce by the ratio of the power 3 from the part load. For instance, if the cooling load is reduced to 80%, then the power of energy consumption will be 80% power 3. That means about the 51%, or it means saving of 49%. It's a big saving. The other approach to make a chiller more efficient is to reduce the mechanical loss due to the friction, especially friction of the bearing. So that's why Ibu Helen already mentioned about the magnetic bearing and the ceramic bearing chillers, make the chillers is more efficient. In magnetic bearing chillers, they have a very excellent efficiency, especially on the low part load, less than 60%. For the magnetic bearing, it is have a very good efficiency on the part load, less than 60%, but a little bit higher on the full load, which is about 0.6 kW per ton. On the other side, the ceramic bearings on the full load can have a very low efficiency, which is about 0.54 kW per ton, even lower. It means about a 10% lower from the magnetic bearing. And as we know, for the hotel application, most of the time has a low part load. So the magnetic bearing or the ceramic bearing is more appropriate for this application. However, it doesn't mean that the other centrifugal chillers type could not be used. They do, as long as they provide with the inverter. That is a must. And we have to analyze which of technology is proper to be used by doing the annual energy consumption calculation by applying the cooling load profile of the building to be used for financial analysis. In this case, is for the payback period analysis. So the other approach that I will share with you in this occasion is most of the case to make a green building, on the most case, to make the cooling system more efficient, the consultant or the building owners are targeting only to have a best efficiency of the chillers unit only. They are looking for a better and more efficient chiller unit. And what they do, they are shopping from one brand to one brand, looking for the best efficiency of the chiller unit only. But anyway, there's another approach just introduced by the ASHRAE through its journal, introducing what we call the chiller plan efficiency. Ibu Helen already mentioned about that. Instead of only chillers unit efficiency. Chiller plan efficiency means that the efficiency of the chiller unit plus the efficiency of the pumps, water pump or condenser water pump, plus the cooling tower. For comparison, the chiller's efficiency only can reduce to up to 22% until 25%. of the current chiller consumption. But the pumps and the cooling towers can reduce until more than 60% reduction. And other measure that we can do for the chiller plant is if we can reduce the flow rate of the chilled water by 25% by increasing the delta T. It means that the pump energy will reduce about 57%. The other thing we can do is to reduce the friction rate or the pressure drop in the piping to reduce the pump energy. It can be done by avoiding the short radius elbow on the pipe and using the long radius elbow and avoid the TY connection branches. To give you the figures that the current chiller plant efficiency is right now, the current, which is the practices, the current practices, is between 0.7 and 0.75 kW per ton. But with the new approach for the chiller plant efficiency, as mentioned above, we can reduce the plant efficiency between 0.5 until 0.55 kW per ton. It is about 25 reduction in chiller plant energy consumption. It's a big reduction. Okay, now it's come to talk about the refrigerant already mentioned by Ibu Helen and Ibu Emma. I just want to highlight that the HFC is already cannot be used very soon because of Kigali Amendment. So right now the candidate for replacement is only R32 HFO refrigerant, which is HFO have about the GWP global warming potential is not more than 5. The R32 have a GWP of 675, and also natural refrigerant, which is a hydrocarbon, have a GWP not more than 5 also. The last two, R32 and the natural refrigerant, still have a flammability properties, which we have to respond in such a way to avoid any dangerous case might be happen. Now we talk about the payback period on the financing scheme. That I think Jim has already mentioned about the current, about the result of the calculation of the sampling on the payback period about 4 until 5 years. And I would like to also to propose an approach to reduce a payback period without any additional costs, which what I mentioned is about the measures that we call about the no or low cost operation and maintenance. The no or low cost approach, which is implementing measures in operation and maintenance with the objective to increase the energy efficiency. This approach is not only theoretical, but is already done and implemented. For examples, by my company doing operation maintenance for about 15 of the ministry office building and achieve reduction on energy consumption about between 13 until 15% energy efficiency with a no cost, so no additional. Some of them even have already energy efficiency index below of 100 kWh per square meters per year, which is lower than the average office building in Indonesia, which is about 150 until 170 kWh per square meters per year. And some of these buildings already awarded as a winner in National and Asian Energy Award. So what I mean, by combining the high cost energy efficiency offered by SDCL or OECD and combined with the no cost measures that I already mentioned above, then we can have a shorter payback period. Some of the no cost practices can be done, for example, is a delay start, early stop to ensure not to operate chillers plant too early or to turn off the chillers is too late. Number 2, let's say increase the living chilled water temperature setting. Every 1 degree centigrade increase will reduce the energy consumption by 2%. And also, if we increase the room temperature setting, every 1 degree centigrade room temperatures increase, we can reduce about 6%. So about the financial scheme, I think I had a question already delivered by Cecilia. So thank you, Cecilia, and already have a good and excellent reply from Jim and Peter. Thank you very much. So this is all my comments. My apology if the comments are too long, and hopefully that the above will give us a mutual benefit for all of us. So thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bapak Rana, for your very helpful and insightful comments. Now, that is the end of our discussion session. And I'd like to thank all of our discussants for sharing with us their expertise. I'd like to thank the participants for submitting their questions. I apologize for those that we were not able to address during our Q&A session. But in the interest of time, we'd like to wrap up now. I'd also like to remind everyone to complete the form that was shared via the chat function, please. Now to move into our wrap up, we've had a very rich discussion today, and I'm not going to attempt to summarize everything, but I would like to share with you what were perhaps my 5 takeaways in this wrap up. First of all, I think we heard very clearly that the demand for cooling was going to be a key driver in future electricity demand growth, and that there were energy efficient products that were available, and that they did not necessarily would not necessarily lead to higher costs. That said, policy measures such as minimum energy performance standards and mandatory energy labeling can play a key role in helping to improve the efficiency of new equipment, and that there was a need for tougher regulation, many of these that are already underway in Indonesia, particularly for higher efficiency and lower GWP refrigerants, to send the right market signals to ensure that global best available technologies is also widely available in Indonesia and at attractive costs. Thirdly, there was a need to look at new financing models, such as cooling as a service model, to facilitate the deployment of more efficient and lower carbon cooling technologies that can help address some of the finance and investment barriers that are faced by asset owners, particularly in the post-COVID green recovery situation. New and innovative financing will be quite crucial to really kickstart this market. Fourth, with the economic stimulus programs that are underway in various countries, including in Indonesia, there is a need to integrate sustainability and green measures as an important catalyst to help create the energy efficiency market. We heard many of the speakers highlight how energy efficiency can lead to a strong green recovery, providing jobs and helping to kickstart the economy with high employment generation per dollar invested in efficiency. And that through these stimulus programs, we could perhaps see the demonstration of some of these new financing models that would be needed for meeting our clean energy and climate goals, particularly as we've discussed today as they pertain to efficient and low carbon cooling systems. And finally, my last takeaway is really the need for some sort of risk guarantee instrument to help improve the bankability of these energy efficiency projects, particularly in the light of global pandemic. Risk sharing instruments, the use of sovereign guarantees, perhaps provided and facilitated by the IFIs or philanthropy, could be part of this. There is a need to continue to have these discussions, to bring together the stakeholders that can really be the key actors to design and implement these types of financing structures. As one of our speakers have highlighted, with relatively small amounts of money, it was referenced here, $5 to $10 million, we could mobilize 10 to 20 times the amount of private finance. So really to stress that there is a very large leverage potential, but we do need to identify and work with the government and other financial actors, industry, to really structure these types of financial interventions. I'd like to end by thanking all of the speakers and discussants for sharing with us your experience and wisdom today. Thank the participants for joining us and for all of your questions. And finally, on my part, I'd like to thank the team at MEMR and MENCO, as well as my colleagues at the OECD for all of their hard work to ensure that that our focus group discussion today ran smoothly. And with the permission of all the speakers, we will make available the presentations as well as the recording from today's discussion on the OECD CEFM website. The OECD is very pleased to have been able to facilitate today's discussion, and we hope that this will be the start of a process that can lead to the development of financing solutions that can assist Indonesia in developing and implementing solutions that align with your green economic recovery, as well as helping to realize the energy efficiency potentials and this clean energy transition. To close our meeting, I would like to pass the floor back to Bapak Haryanto, who will be providing some closing remarks. Thank you very much. Bapak Haryanto.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Cecil. Thank you, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. We have holding discussion that I think they are very productive. We all from regulators and all stakeholders in the field of energy efficiency welcome to the financing opportunities for this model to be realized in Indonesia. I think all energy efficiency stakeholders are still waiting for the realization of an energy performance contract-based project. And the subsector cooling system is a promising one as a recovery economy after the pandemic COVID-19. We hope that this FGD will have the follow-up soon, and all parties involved can resolve all obstacles that may exist. We look forward to working together to develop a strategy for how to implement this quickly. This activity will strongly support the energy efficiency program and emission reduction. Thank you, OECD. Thank you, IEA. Thank you, SDCL, Kementerian Lingkungan Hidup, ADB, ASRE, ASDM, and all participants. I hereby close the FGD today. Thank you for the participation of all parties. Good day. Have a nice day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a nice day, everybody.
Thank you all.
Pak Rana, terima kasih. Sehat selalu, Pak. Sehat selalu, Pak. Kapan-kapan